Hello YouTubers, I want to welcome you to the making of my 412th album. Okay, and for those who aren't aware, I'm a guitarist who plays guitar and does loops done on the fly, and then I emulate bass on guitar as well, and some other instruments like synthesizers and things. Okay, and beyond that, and the reason why there are 412 albums is because they're all spontaneous. In other words, created on the fly, right? In other words, not prepared ahead of time. And basically what you hear on these albums is basically what's coming out of my guitar speaker, so there are no real overdubs in the sense of a traditional recording. Now, for volume 412, right, the official title is Guitarist Denis Taaffe, Modern Guitar, Volume 412, Pantheon, or Pantheon, depending on who you talk to. And Pantheon, it really, if you use the classical Greek translation, right, it means to all the gods, or temple to all the gods. And in fact, there are actually two of them that are really well known. One is in Rome, Italy, which is quite old. I mean, we're talking like AD something, right? And then there's one in France as well, okay, which came much later. In any case, I thought that, wow, that'd be a cool name for an album. And we can take a look at the cover here. Okay, and basically it's a public domain photo where I added a guitar. I thought, wow, it really looks like you're inside one of these buildings, right? Okay, so anyway, that's the album cover, and I should mention, in the past, well, I used to call my albums modern rock guitar, right? But now it's just modern guitar. And a lot of that has to do with the style, right? I wouldn't necessarily call it a rock album, as I did in my younger days. The other thing is, while all the music is done on guitar, you could ask yourself, well, is it a guitar album or not? And it is, though I have to say, a lot of my albums have a cinematic approach, if you like, in the sense that I imagine that's music for film. And you'll see it becomes quite apparent, especially on this album. Alright, so here's what we're going to do. We're going to go through, it has 12 tracks, and we'll go through each one a little bit, and I'll try to tell you what I was thinking, or maybe what I was using, shed some insight onto the tracks, and maybe it'll help. Right? Maybe. Okay. So here was what we're going to do. We're going to start out with the intro track. Right? The very first track on the album. Okay. And the very first track is kind of a interesting track because it has no real tonal center at all. And I thought that'd be a good intro track. And reminds me very much of whenever you hear, a big orchestra, right? And everyone's warming up, before they start really playing. And this, to me, gives me this same kind of feeling, I guess. Alright, so let's take a listen to that. And this uses a lot of guitar synthesizer, guitar loops done on the fly. And you'll hear some normal guitar as well. So that's the intro track to the album. Now, and again, it's kind of like this orchestra, warming up or what have you. Now here comes the main theme of the album. And in reality, I think that this comes from was inspired by a video game, or maybe it was a computer video game, or an Xbox video game, from years ago, that had a similar kind of theme. We can take a listen to it here. And I'm trying to remember what it was that I had played on that. I think there were a lot of fifths involved. Kind of like... Well, let's take a listen to it. So that's the main theme of the album. And in fact, from what I recall, I probably used an Electro-Harmonix Bass 9 pedal. And let me show you something. see, I made this pedal board, and it has all kinds of electro-harmonics pedals, starting with the Mel 9, which is kind of like a mellotron type of sound, so you can get choirs and things. Then you had a Key 9 right here, right, electronic keyboard, a String 9, and then the Bass 9. And the Bass 9 sounds like a bass, right? So I believe that I used that on it. When I was recording at this time, I was all into, using all kinds of synthesizer sounds and different kind of sounds from different pedals, you know. So not just your normal guitar sounds. Alright, let's move on to track 3. And track 3 is a good example of just all the different sounds I was using at the time. Okay, and there you can tell it's kind of in a major key, so it gives you kind of dreamy sound. Anyway, there I could tell I was using a bass guitar loop, right? On top of that, playing chords, regular guitar, and then a synthesizer sound. Alright, now let's try track 4. Here we go. And you wouldn't know it immediately from listening to it, that the actual driving force of that track is this kind of a bass line, right? That has effects on it, and it's actually playing an arpeggio for each chord. If you listen to it very closely, you can hear that. So the bass sound, it almost sounds like a bass synthesizer rather than a traditional bass sound. Alright, let's move on to track number 5. Ah, yes. Okay, now, this track, I know that I used a, what is it, Line 6 HX1, right? And I used kind of a phaser kind of sound, and you can kind of hear it here, to try to produce this kind of a mysterious atmosphere, if you like. We can take a listen to it here. Here with this track, what I discovered in looping and those kinds of things is that sometimes less is more, in the sense that you, if you fill up the loops with too many guitar parts and things, it becomes kind of a jumbled mess, right? Whereas here it's much simpler than that. You basically have kind of a bass kind of line and then the phased guitar. And if you listen closely going forward, we also have a little notes that are swelled in, right? Kind of like a little melody line. And we can hear that. Right there. Yeah, so there you can hear the little swelled line, the melody lines. And taking all that into consideration, if you like, is how you get this kind of atmosphere building. And there I'm just not using a lot of different loops, you know, which is kind of a hard thing to do because for me, because I like to find all these different guitar parts and put them in there, right? But again, you know, it sometimes becomes overwhelming as far as loops go. Alright, track 6. Let's hear that one. This one has some strange guitar sounds, right? and they're a combination of these pedals. I'm not sure exactly what I used, but it gives you kind of this, yeah, strange guitar sound. That's all I can say about it. I know one of them was a shimmer effect from one of the pedals. And if you listen to the bass line, I think I ran through a Boss DD200 delay, which can give you some really interesting sounds as well. And if you'll hear it, it kind of has a shooting sound on each note of the bass. You can hear it here. So, as you can imagine, for a guitarist to be able to basically play anything he wants, right, and then experiment with all these different kinds of sounds, it really is like a, kid in a candy store. I really enjoyed it. Okay, track 7. Alright, now this one has kind of a traditional bass sound, and it has a really cool bass line, except I don't know why I did that. To be fancy pants, I added an extra bass note, which I really shouldn't have, but that's just the way it came out. And then on top of it, I've got standard guitar kind of triads and things. You can hear it here. But you'll hear that bass line. But then at one part, it goes ba ba ba, right? 3 notes instead of 2. All right, and then I have, as I mentioned, the standard little triad, regular guitar sound. Then I have a synthesizer kind of melody sound, and if you listen closely, a delayed guitar, right, with a delay on it, so we can hear that. I think it's called Ants. And that's kind of what it reminds me of, that, especially with that bass line. You know, and what's interesting is the bass line is not continuous. It stops and then starts again. You'll see. Here we go. Track 8. Let's hear that one. Alright, now that's a lot of delayed guitar. Plays a repeating pattern. You can hear it here. It's actually quite a long track. It's like 8 minutes long, so let's fast forward a little bit. Tell you, on its own, you know, it's okay, but in the context of the album, right, it really fits well, creating this kind of atmosphere, or mood, if you like. Alright, now here's track 9. And this track also uses the shimmer effect, and it kind of sounds like something underwater, you know? Like if you were to find gold coins underwater, or this kind of thing. It's kind of what it reminded me of anyway. So, yeah, you can hear that very well. It's the same kind of thing. It fits really well with the album, you know. But I mean, on its own, you probably wouldn't hear that on the radio. Alright, track 10. Alright, so here I'm using a guitar synthesizer and then that bass line. You know, so it's quite sparse, but really creates that kind of mood or atmosphere. If you take a listen. To me, seems to fit very well with the album as well. Alright, track 11. So, this particular track, it's kind of a happier track than a lot of the previous tracks on the album. Though it's not too happy. So, let's take a listen. Fast forward a little bit. Of course, you've got your bass line, and then you've got the melody kind of synthesizer line, and in between that, you've got the regular guitar playing something totally different. And you can hear that here. Here's track 12, and track 12, remember the theme of the album was track 2, and track 12 is kind of like the reprise of that, or the part 2 of the main theme, but with a twist, and that is, rather than just the main theme, I've added some guitar to it, and it changes it totally. You can hear it here. I think it's a good end to the album. So that's some delayed guitar, and what a difference it makes. And if we go back to track 2 and hear just the main theme without the guitar. Much different. Okay. Whereas on this one, with the added guitar, it changes the track, overall. Okay, and there you go. That's volume 412. And I think that overall, having the tracks, especially in this order, is very much kind of what I had in mind. Reminds me kind of you'd see or hear this music in maybe a World War I or World War II war film, It gives that kind of atmosphere. And in fact, some of the tracks, they fit the album really well, but when you pull them out of context, they're kind of like, well, they create a mood or atmosphere, but you don't get the whole story. And, I think it's almost a lost art these days, with, singles and things, kind of, Spotify singles and this kind of thing. But years ago, like Pink Floyd, The Wall, if you pulled a song out of The Wall, a lot of times it's kind of like, what is this? It doesn't really make sense. In other words, building an album, and having each song further the story or complement the other songs on the album. It's sad because it really is becoming a lost art, As I mentioned, nowadays it's all about, singles and, that kind of thing. So anyway, I'm very pleased with this album, actually. I think rather than a traditional guitar album, while it was all done on guitar and things, and the fact that it was, improvised on the spot, turned out really well, with some interesting sounds. Now, I wish I could remember how I got each sound, I suppose I have a pretty good idea, but, some of the sounds I'll never really be able to recreate, but overall, to me it really tells a story, as vague as it is, Well, we'll see what volume 413 has in store. We'll find out. Alright, very good. So Mitty and I are saying goodbye. Okay, and we'll see you next time. Okay.